Yeah, so like Darren was saying, my name's Nick, Nick Taylor. I'm from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, so east coast of Canada. Like he said too, I'm one of the leads at Forem. If you're looking for me anywhere online, I'm pretty much at Nicky T online everywhere. You can also check out my site, imdeveloper.com, and I also stream on Twitch. You can check that out at livecoding.ca or twitch.tv/thepracticaldev. Uh, and also not a big fan of spiders. Cool. So yeah, so what we'll cover today is why knowing your tools is important. We're gonna talk about some tools. These are tools that I use every day. So I'm gonna share some little knowledge nuggets there from all these things. So we're gonna go through VS Code a bit. I'm gonna talk about the GitHub CLI, so the command line interface for GitHub. Then we're gonna look into browser tooling. We're going to do all kinds of stuff like inspecting elements, look at the CSS panel. There's a bunch of stuff in there. There's also an accessibility panel, which we'll take a peek in there too. And just a few other things like the command palette, the sources panel, and then we'll get into debugging some JavaScript in the browser. And from there, what we're going to do is we're also going to do some debugging of JavaScript in VS Code. And we're gonna wrap it up with how to be a detective. So just some debugging techniques that I'll share with all of you. Okay, so let's get to it. So why is knowing your tools important? One reason is productivity. If you know your tools better, like shortcuts, you know how to do something because you know how the tool works, the productivity is definitely a big win. Depending on what the tools are, it can help you diagnose problems. They can also help you understand the systems you work in. And of course, as developers, we all like to customize things. So you got to be able to set that favorite font in your editor or terminal. So you need to learn how to do that too. Anyways, that was a bad joke. Sorry. Okay, let's get to tools. Okay, so tools are super important. And before I even go into talking about some tools, one thing that I find useful, and this happens on Twitter a lot, where I am a lot in a lot of the developer communities, but like people always be like, oh, what's that thing you're using? And then somebody will be like, oh, well, check out my uses page. So there's this concept of a uses page. And so like, for example, here's mine on my website, and it's a list of all the stuff I use from my editor, extensions, and so on. I also talk about like my desk setup and stuff. And this is something that not everybody does, but there's a bunch of folks that do this. And also, in terms of sharing, Wes Boss, who's pretty well known in the web developer community, he created this project called uses.tech. And this is literally a page where people from all over the world that are developers just share the things they use. So I'd highly encourage you to check that out if you're looking for new tools or maybe other things that could help you do your work. So definitely check that stuff out. Cool. All right, so we're going to start off with VS Code. So VS Code is Visual Studio Code. It's a Microsoft product, but it is open source. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through some quick tips, maybe go over a few shortcuts. It's not a super long talk, so I can't really go super deep into a lot of things, but I also want to share a few extensions I use. So the first things that I find are super useful, and I'm just going to move the little screen of me and Darren there. So you have all these things on the side here. So I have my toolbar set to the right, but it defaults to the left. But you have like the Explorer pane. This is where your files are normally. You can search for things. This is a Git tab and so on. And sometimes when you're working, like if I open up a project, and this is kind of tying into the useful Git extensions. This is an extension called Project Manager. So these are different projects I work on. So for example, if I open up Forem, you're going to see all the code here load up on the side. Now I can switch and I can search and all kinds of stuff. But there's also keyboard shortcuts to do these things. So one thing that I do a lot is, if I just open this file here. So I'm also zoomed in right now just because we're doing a stream here. But let me just hide this. So like, if I'm working, I'm like, well, that's sidebar. It's like, I can't really see much. So I want to hide it. And you can click on the icons here to do that. But there's another thing you can do, which is if you press Command B, or if you're on a non-Mac machine, Control B, you can just toggle showing and hiding it. There's another thing you can do, which is Command Shift E, which will go to the Explorer. You can do, for example, Command Shift D, which will go to the debugger, and so on. So there's a bunch of shortcuts. I won't go into all of them. There's a link in the resources at the end of the talk, but I strongly encourage you to check out the shortcuts because I find it makes myself more productive. So definitely check that out.